The fourth report looked exactly like the first three. Same atmospheric grid reference, same particulate signature, same projected accumulation curve. I'd updated the numbers, because the numbers had gotten worse, but the formatting was identical. I'd stopped adding explanatory notes after the second one. The explanatory notes hadn't helped. I sent it at 0640 station time, and had a response by 071 SEER. Station Master Veth Pelline's office was efficient. I'll give them that. The response read, Monitor Voss. This office has now reviewed 4 consecutive atmospheric anomaly filings originating from your assigned zone. Our technical review team has examined each in turn and found no deviation outside Pelithine operational parameters. We note that your flagging threshold appears calibrated to human respiratory sensitivity, which, as you are aware, differs substantially from the biochemical baseline for which Orindis Station was designed and is maintained. We are suspending your access to the primary monitoring array for a period of 14 days, effective immediately, to allow recalibration and review. A wellness consultation has been scheduled with Station Medical. We trust you understand this is a measure of care, not censure. I read it twice. I saved a copy. Then I went to find breakfast, because there was nothing else immediately useful I could do, and I hadn't eaten since the previous afternoon. Orindis Station was a Pelithine Merchant Syndicate facility, a mid-tier commercial hub sitting at the junction of 3 shipping lanes, the kind of place that existed entirely to facilitate the movement of cargo and contracts, and to take a small percentage of everything that passed through. The Pelithine were good at that. They were smooth carapaced, copper-banded at the joints, methodical, and almost constitutionally incapable of entertaining the idea that a piece of infrastructure they owned and operated might be doing something they hadn't accounted for. I was one of 4 human personnel on the station. The other 3 were freight brokers. They found my situation mildly entertaining, in the way that people find things entertaining when those things aren't happening to them. 4 reports, said Davin, over what passed for coffee in the station commissary. Davin was the oldest of the 3, mid-60s, had been working Pelithine routes since before I was certified. He had the particular stillness of a man who had seen administrative systems eat people whole, and had long since made his peace with it. 4, I said. And the reading is still climbing? 17% above baseline when they pulled my access. That was this morning. He nodded slowly. He didn't say anything immediately useful, which I had come to understand was his version of sympathy. The glyceride particulate issue wasn't complicated, as these things go. The station's atmospheric circulators had a specific filter medium, a mesh assembly designed and rated for Pelithine biochemistry, which was based on a different respiratory pathway than mine. The Pelithine processed certain aromatic compounds through a membrane filtration system, which meant their filters were calibrated to catch what mattered for them. Glyceride particulates weren't on that list. They weren't harmful to Pelithine. They passed straight through the filter mesh, accumulated in the recirculation loop, and, given enough time and enough accumulation, would form a fine crystalline suspension in the air, which was also not harmful to Pelithine. It was, however, quite harmful to anything with a mucous membrane respiratory system, including humans, including, as it happened, roughly half the species represented in the trading traffic that passed through Orindis Station on any given week. I had noted this in my first report, in somewhat more technical language, but the point had been clear enough. 2 of my 3 fellow humans found me in the commissary at lunch. The freight brokers, Sanich and Pell, both younger than Devon, both with the restless energy of people who spent their days turning problems into commissions, sat down across from me with the particular expression of people who want to discuss a thing, but aren't sure if they should. They really suspended your access? Sanich said. For recalibration and review. Recalibration of what? Me, I think. Pell looked at Sanich. Sanich looked at Pell. Sanich had worked Pelithine routes for 6 years. He knew the bureaucratic grammar well enough to translate. They called you hysterical, he said, just in administrative language. They called me condition sensitive, which is polite for the same thing. Pell was quiet for a moment, then, is the reading still climbing, do you think, even without your access? I'd have to guess. But the physics haven't changed. He nodded. They both nodded, in the way of people who understand exactly what's happening and have correctly assessed that there is nothing immediately useful they can do about it. Sanich offered me the rest of his food. I took it. We talked about other things. The wellness consultation was at 1400. The station medic was a Pelathine named Ossavel Ven, who was perfectly competent and perfectly well-meaning, and who spent 45 minutes explaining, in careful, measured tones, that humans were known to have heightened sensitivity to environmental variance, and that this was a documented biological characteristic, and that there was no shame in acknowledging physiological limits. I acknowledged my physiological limits. I thanked her. I left. On the way out, she stopped me, gently, with one smooth carapaced hand on my forearm. She said, in a lower voice than she'd used inside, "I've looked at your readings, the ones in the first 2 reports." She paused. "I don't think you're wrong." I looked at her. She looked back, steady and careful. "Then why?" "Because I'm station medical," she said, "and this is a structural operations matter, and those are separate jurisdictions on Orundus." She let go of my arm. "I've sent a query to the operations engineering team. Informally. I wanted you to know." "Thank you," I said. I meant it. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "Engineering hasn't responded." They hadn't responded by the end of the day. They hadn't responded by the following morning either, which I know because Ossavel sent me a note saying so, brief and precise, with no editorializing. I sent her back a note that said only, "Thank you for trying." She replied, "Noted." We left it there. On my way back through the commercial ring, I took a slightly longer route than necessary. The secondary ventilation nodes for sections D through G were accessible via a maintenance corridor that ran behind the commissary. I'd mapped it 6 weeks ago, the first week I was on station, partly out of professional habit, and partly because the layout of the primary vent network had struck me as optimistic about what a single flush cycle could accomplish in sections D and G specifically. Orundus's designers had assumed that a single central push would clear both sections. They were wrong about the geometry. The secondary node could reach both independently. It was not on any of the official monitoring dashboards. I noted the access panel code, force of habit. I went back to my quarters and spent the afternoon reading. On the morning of day 3, I woke up to find a notification in my queue from Station Logistics. The Pelathine Merchant Syndicate's Regional Contract Summit had begun. 32 senior delegates, sealed trading floor on level 4, atmospheric system running in closed-loop recirculation to maintain signal security. Closed loop meant no fresh intake from the main circulatory network. Just the same air, cycling. I pulled up the last reading I'd been able to take before my access was suspended. I did the math on a notepad. I did it again to make sure. Then I got dressed and went to find Station Master Pellorn. His outer office told me he was unavailable. I sat down and waited. The outer office told me again, after 40 minutes, that the station master was in closed session and would not be available until the summit concluded. I asked when that would be. 3 days, they said. I nodded and asked them to pass along a written message. They said they would. I wrote it out. The particulate density in the closed trading floor would reach crystalline suspension threshold in approximately 6 hours, given the accumulation rate I'd last measured, and the reduced air volume of the sealed floor. I included the math. I asked them to share it with whoever was responsible for the floor's atmospheric monitoring. I signed it, left a copy with the clerk, and went back to the commissary. Devon looked at me when I sat down. "They're in closed session," I said. "I heard the summit started. Closed-loop recirculation in a sealed floor." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "How long?" 6 hours. Maybe 5, if the seal is tighter than spec. He looked at his coffee. "Did you tell them?" "I left a note." He nodded. He didn't say anything else. Neither did I. We sat there for a while, in the comfortable silence of people who have done what they could do and are now waiting to find out which way it lands. It was 4 hours and 20 minutes in the end. Not 6. The first alert came through the station-wide system at 1347. A medical response request from level 4, unspecified. The second came 6 minutes later. An atmospheric anomaly flag from the trading floor's own internal monitors, which had apparently finally decided the readings were worth escalating. The Pelathine biofilter read it as nominal, because of course it did. and then tagged it as anomalous, because the delegates were clearly in respiratory distress despite nominal readings, which created a logic conflict the system didn't have a resolution path for. I was already in the maintenance corridor behind the commissary when the second alert went through. The secondary node access panel opened on the first try. The flush sequence for sections D and G combined was a 12-step manual process. Because no one had ever expected anyone to run it from this access point, it was a maintenance reset, not an operational control. I ran it anyway. It took 11 minutes. There was a slight vibration in the ductwork when it engaged, a low resonant hum that lasted about 30 seconds, and then faded. I closed the panel and went back to the corridor. The third alert, when it came, was a station-wide all clear with a note that the level 4 atmospheric event had been resolved via emergency flush. It did not specify which flush or from which node. I had not told anyone I was doing it. There hadn't been time to route it through a committee. I went to level 4. The trading floor doors were open. The delegates were in various states of recovery, some still seated, some standing near the walls, copper joint bands duller than usual, respiratory membranes visibly irritated. There were medics. There was a lot of controlled activity that was trying not to look like panic. Station Master Pelorn was sitting in a chair near the far wall. His joint bands had gone almost entirely dark. His outer respiratory membrane had a faint crystalline sheen to it, fine and even, like frost on a window. He was breathing, but carefully. One of the medics was crouched beside him. He saw me. I saw him see me. I waited. After a moment, he said, in a voice that was not quite his usual register, "Monitor Voss. Station Master." He looked at me for a while, then he looked at his hands, then he looked back at me. "The fourth report," he said, "the accumulation curve." "Yes. How long has the secondary node been there?" "It was in the original construction schematic. Section 7, Maintenance Addendum, page 43. He was quiet. One of the medics said something to him and he waved it off. "The flush," he said, "that was you." There wasn't time to submit a work order. He looked at me for another long moment. His membranes were still crystalline at the edges. He reached out and a clerk materialized with a tablet. He took it. He signed something. Then another thing. Then he held the tablet out toward me. It was the reinstatement order. Full array access. A mandatory full-spectrum atmospheric audit, station-wide, to be completed within 30 days. His authority signature at the bottom, slightly unsteady. I took the tablet. I looked at it. I handed it to my own clerk, the logistics coordinator who had found me in the corridor and followed me here, and who was going to have a great deal of paperwork in her immediate future. Pelorn was still watching me, like he was waiting for something. I didn't have anything particular to give him. The math had been in the report. The report had been in his queue for 6 weeks. I hadn't enjoyed being wrong, but he hadn't asked me whether I'd enjoyed it. "The wellness consultation," I said finally. "Do I still need to go?" He blinked. His membranes crinkled slightly at the edges. It might have been irritation from the particulates. It might have been something else. "No," he said. "I think we can cancel that." "Thank you," I said. "I'll start the audit Monday." I left him there with his medic and his crystalline membranes, and his very long afternoon. On the way out, I passed Devon in the doorway, because of course he'd come to look. He glanced at the tablet in my coordinator's hands, and then at me. "Monday?" he said. "Monday," I said. He fell into step beside me. Neither of us said anything else. There wasn't much that needed saying. The report was on file. It had always been on file. The numbers had just needed a little time to catch up.